and Betty Shabazz Memorial and Education Center on this 50th anniversary of our beloved brother Malcolm X's brutal assassination on this very spot. This spot, for people's information, was going to be torn down by Columbia University about 15 years ago, but after a mass struggle in the black community, among student activists at Columbia and historical landmark preservationists, Columbia University was forced to back down, and now we have, protected by law, this site is preserved, and this is our site, this is our hallowed ground. For us in the Cuba Solidarity Movement, this space is hallowed ground. Malcolm was one of the earliest and most forceful and uncompromising supporters and defenders of the Cuban Revolution in the United States. I want to thank Brother Brian Epps from the Center for working with us on securing this venue. And in a minute, Brian will give us an official welcome. Supporters of the Cuban Revolution in the New York, New Jersey area have always celebrated the July 26, 1953 attack on the Moncada barracks in Santiago de Cuba, led by Fidel Castro and Abel Santamaria, the event that sparked the triumphant Cuban Revolution. The forces that formed the July 26 coalition came together 12 years ago to celebrate the 50th anniversary of the Moncada attack. And we have organized sizable events every year since, as well as numerous other Cuba Solidarity events. And for many years, a constant focus of our work has been the fight to free our Cuban Five brothers. Tonight's celebration is, of course, very special because it is our first one since Antonio, Fernando, Gerardo, Ramon, and Rene are all free and at home with their families. And they went home as unbowed and unbroken revolutionaries. As part of their ongoing revolutionary activities, they have just returned to Cuba from enthusiastic welcomes in South Africa, Namibia, Nicaragua, and El Salvador. So their work is continuing. At tonight's celebration, we will also register the victory for the Cuban Revolution and the U.S. Solidarity Movement with the establishment of formal diplomatic relations between the United States and Cuba. While we fully recognize that a meaningful normalization of relations will not occur until the end, once and for all, of all U.S. economic and travel sanctions and the return of U.S.-occupied Cuban territory in Guantanamo, these developments politically represent a retreat by Washington and the realization by the U.S. ruling class under the Obama administration that the policy of the last 54 years was utterly isolated in the world and especially damaging in the Americas to U.S. interests and was no longer sustainable in its present form. So this is a clear victory, and we celebrate this tonight. Our co-chairs tonight are Sister Joan Gibbs, who is a longtime fighter for social justice and the oppressed and exploited overwhelming majority of humanity, and Brother Cesar Sanchez, a leader of the July 26 coalition, as well as the artist behind the creation of our beautiful publicity materials for our events, which we are noted for and sometimes take for granted. So please welcome Joan and Cesar. Venceremos hasta la victoria siempre.
I'm Joan Gibbs. Our first speaker tonight is Brian Epps. Brian is a graduate of Rutgers University in the New School And for the past year, he has been the executive director of the Malcolm X and Dr. Betty Shabazz Memorial Educational Center. And as I indicated, Brian was instrumental in our getting this space tonight. Brian?
Thank you for that warm welcome. Hey, how you doing? Good evening, everybody. Just very quickly, want to thank you all for coming out to this space. As I mentioned and did a great job explaining, it's a very special memorial. Most memorials that you'll go to, you might see a few quotes, you might see a statue. Here, we're not just a place that memorializes Malcolm X and Dr. Betty Shabazz, but we continue to celebrate their lives and their legacy through continuous programming and activities. So it's only fitting that you're here, and I hope that you continue to make this place home and make this a very special part of your lives. So thank you again.
We wanted to begin the program tonight with video of the activities outside the new Cuban embassy in Washington, D.C., when the Cuban flag was raised.
For many of you who has been on the struggle for more than 40 years, this is definitely a huge victory. On Monday, July 20th, history has been made. I would like to read something from the Foreign Minister Bruno Rodriguez Parrilla, who spoke at the ceremony of the reopening of the Cuban embassy in Washington. And he says, "We've been able to make it to this date thanks to the firm and wise leadership of Fidel Castro Ruiz, the historic leader of the Cuban Revolution, and the will and the sacrifice, the selflessness, the heroic resistance, and the work of our people." Ladies and gentlemen, history, again, has been made. I'd like to introduce right now nuestro compañero, hermano, Rodolfo Reyes, the Cuban ambassador to the United Nations.
Viva Cuba.
When I entered in the place, I saw the statue of Malcolm X. To me, that was a very special moment to be in front of a symbol of a very revolutionary person and a guy that has been fighting, has been bringing his life for the social justice and for the freedom and for the equality of all those in U.S., particularly African Americans that has been in a very difficult situation through so many years from the time of slavery. I think that is, to me, to be celebrating or to be commemorating the 62nd anniversary of the assault on the Moncada's garrison in this particular place is very special. But the second element is to see so many friends, brothers and sisters that has been in this fight for more than 50 years, backing us, people that has been with Cuba, with the Cuban people, with Fidel, with Raúl Castro, and with our leaders in very difficult situation. I remember myself that I was part of the Cuban staff, the Cuban mission, in the year 1996. That was that kind of provocation by the Brother to a Rescue, and that was the year that it occurred, that event of the shutdown of the two airplanes. And I remember some of your faces backing Cuba, backing our truth, and backing us. Some of you also be fighting on all these situations. I remember the so-called 75 that has been mercenaries that has been used to overrule the Cuban Revolution, and that has been in jail. It means that has been some of you even, well, probably not so many of you because you are very young, all of you, but that has been back in Cuba at the time of Girón, at the time of so many difficult episodes that has been faced by the Cuban people, and that is why we are so proud to be experience the raise of the Cuban flag. I think that is, to me, has been particularly important for two cases: the reestablishment of the diplomatic relationship between Cuba and U.S. And I think that is we are not naive. We know perfectly that the most important process and fight is still to move forward, because the embargo is still in place, and there is no any special release, and that is affecting, and that is creating a lot of difficulties to our people. We have also this territory of our sovereignty, that is a Guantanamo base, that I think that need to be back to the Cuban people jurisdiction, because it's part of us. But there is still so many other obstacles. We have still all those contra-revolutionary emissions of TV and radio that are broadcasting directly to against the Cuban Revolution and against our social project. And we have also the interference of and all those money that is still passed to try to overrule and to undermine our revolution, and try to be backing all those that are trying to destroy the Cuban Revolution. I think that is still, and we have been very clear that the normalization between Cuba and U.S. is going to be a long process. But there are so many elements that from time to time, when you have a fight that is so long, there is so people, when you have the real revolutionaries, those that are never surrounded, and are always fighting for to get victory. I think that the case of victory in our fight has been very difficult. I think that is precisely that kind of symbolic meaning of what occurred on December 17, and also what occurred in the raising of the Cuban flag in the mission in Washington. First of all, the most important, that was the return to Cuba to the three heroes that has been still in jail, particularly in the case of Gerardo. That was in our mind very difficult, that we have the clear picture that he's going to be able to be back, and also that he's going to be a father, as he is now. And I think that has been very important for the Cuban people. Second, that after so many years, after 10 U.S. administration, definitely the U.S. government need to recognize the Cuban government, and particularly the leadership of Fidel and Raúl Castro. And the Cuban government has been recognized under the leadership and the continuity of all those people that has been fighting for social justice, for peace, for freedom, that never compromised any principle, and that always spoke clearly that the Cuban Revolution is going to continue. And I think that has been, for all of us, that is a new generation. I was born after the victory of the Cuban Revolution, and for us to have that kind of recognition that is a victory on continuity on the revolution, and there is no any treason, and there is no any commitment to surround or to be abandon any of our main principles. And finally, because for me also is backing, is a recognition, and is a main victory of all Latin American people, all a revolutionary and progressist person all around the world that has been expressing solidarity without any requirement, without any request to the Cuban people, and particularly because it's your victory that we has been already able at least to reestablish the diplomatic relation. For that reason, I would like to express our very deep appreciation and our eternal thanks for what you did and what you continue to do backing the Cuban people and backing the Cuban Revolution. I think that is because of you, your fight also, that Cuba has been able to reestablish and to raise our flag, our national flag, the flag of the dignity, the flag of those causes that we never going to abandon. We are always going to be fighting for the liberation of Oscar López Rivera. We always going to be backing all those forces in Puerto Rico that are fighting for self-determination and independence. We always going to be backing all those that are taking into account the situation of this community of Latin American origin here in the U.S. that also that for migration and for other cases are not able to enjoy the same rights of the rest of Americans. We are always going to be backing the African Americans that are fighting for their rights and their full enjoyment of freedom and social justice. And we are always going to be backing anyone in the planet and in the world that are fighting for justice, for freedom, and for equality. And for that case also, Cuba always are going to be attached to our socialist project that is backing and is granting Cuba a continuity is granting the Cuban people that recognition of sovereignty, dignity, and solidarity between all those Cubans. And Cuba finally also is going to be expressing solidarity, and that has been reconfirmed by Raúl Castro himself in the closing of the meeting of the National Assembly. We are going to be continuing expressing solidarity to all those people that are in need, not only on political cases, also through our doctors, the medicine, through the medicine, the health sector, also in the fishing. And for instance, as Raúl Castro, in some cases, those countries that have money are able at least to support us paying for that. But in cases like Haiti and others that have no money, we are going to continue to be providing that assistance. Finally, I would like to say that after 62 years, that to have a revolution that is totally alive, that is keeping respect of our people to our leaders, that are continuing respecting the leadership, the historical leadership of Fidel Castro, that person that was very idealistic, that 26 July 1953, to be able to attack with only some rifles and so very light weapons, a garrison like Moncada, that was one of the main garrisons in Cuba, that has been the most important in the eastern part of the island, is precisely that kind of ideals, that kind of commitment, that kind of a vision that when you are fighting for justice, I think that everything is possible and no one can deprive you to continue to be moving for what is an idea and a conviction that is needed to be in favor of anyone. Thank you very much, and viva la Revolución Cubana, viva el 26 de junio.
Thank you, Rodolfo. Gracias, Rodolfo. As he clearly highlighted, this is still a struggle. It's a victory, yes. Solidarity is very important. So we must continue to keep on marching further.
Cubans came to Africa, and unlike anybody, any other nation that has gone to Africa, took nothing back home with them, didn't try to colonize, didn't try to get Africa's gold or any of its resources. And we thank you for that too. Jason Corley is a longtime member of the July 26th Coalition and an activist. And also I learned tonight, I've known Jason for a long time, but I learned tonight that he's also a public school teacher, which makes me very, very happy. Jason.
The following is a solidarity statement from the Coalition. Greetings, sisters and brothers in struggle. The July 26th Coalition of New York and is a coalition of New York and New Jersey-based Cuba solidarity groups and others that fight to end the U.S. embargo and end the travel restrictions against Cuba, organize programs that present the truth about Cuba's revolutionary socialist process, and over the past 16 years have fought for the freedom of the Cuban Five, a fight that ended with their victorious release from U.S. prisons on 17th of December of last year. On July 24th, the same day on which the movement for Black Lives Convening begins, we will be celebrating 62 years since the initial battles led by Fidel Castro that launched the fight against the U.S.-backed dictatorship at that time. In 1959, the Cuban people are victorious, a revolutionary victory that continues in Cuba to this day. The Coalition stands in solidarity with the participants in this weekend's important convening on the fight against police brutality. Over the past year, young people across the nation, along with family members such as those of Eric Garner, Michael Brown, Jermaine Reed, and others, have led thousands of people in ongoing protests demanding full prosecution of brutal cops. During this same period, some of these family members have shared platforms with Cuba solidarity activists, including members of the Federation of Cuban Women, to inform broader audiences about their cases and their fight for justice. Actions like these and others have forced the U.S. government at the federal, state, and local levels to take a more defensive posture. More mainstream media coverage on the issue of police violence now exists than ever before, as politicians, more than ever before, debate on how to best reform the police, more and more conceding to the fact that police brutality is as prevalent as blacks especially have always known. These politicians nevertheless continue to push for as few prosecutions of cops as possible. To this day, very few, if any, of the cops involved in killings in recent years have been indicted, let alone convicted. The U.S. government has likewise recently taken a defensive posture toward revolutionary socialist Cuba as well. Even though the criminal economic blockade against Cuba still remains in place, just as cops who commit brutality remain free, diplomatic relations on Cuba's terms have been reestablished just days ago. This is due to the Cuban people's determination to maintain their revolutionary course, along with the support of their right to do so by millions worldwide, including growing numbers here in the United States. As Fidel Castro once said, the more we resist, the more we are respected. Likewise, and finally, the resistance of fighters against police brutality here in the United States have earned the respect of many worldwide. From the United States to the Dominican Republic to Israel and elsewhere, the slogan, Black Lives Matter, resonates among young fighters against injustice. The July 26th Coalition wishes the participants in this Black Lives Convening a weekend of fruitful discussion, debate, and action plans for the coming period ahead. Together we will win, venceremos. In solidarity, July 26th Coalition, New York, New Jersey. Thank you.
One of the things that the United States government has historically denied is the existence of political prisoners in the United States. We know that's not true. We know that there's not only were the Cuban Five, but there are domestic activists who are imprisoned here in the United States for their opposition to the international and domestic policies of the United States, and local policies too. There are at least over 50 political prisoners. One of them you're going to hear about now is Oscar Lopez. Oscar Lopez is in jail, as I understand it, for seditious conspiracy because this is conspiracy, I'll put on my lawyer hat now, is an old charge that really doesn't require you to do much, just be plotting against the government. And Oscar was doing that for the freedom of Puerto Rico. I want to note here, a lot of people have been likening the situation in Puerto Rico to Greece. But there's something that you should know about. There is a big difference between those two places. Puerto Rico is a colony of the United States. Greece is an independent nation. And Puerto Rico, in my opinion, I may be wrong, would not have the problems that they had if they were an independent nation. So with that, I want to bring you Ben Ramos. Ben is a member of Pro Libertad.
Thank you, Joan. On behalf of the Pro Libertad Freedom Campaign and the Puerto Rican community, I want to thank the July 26th Coalition for providing us this opportunity to share Oscar's writing. It's not common for us to receive writing from Oscar, so these moments are very precious and we're very appreciative to have them. Before I even get into that, and thank you, Joan, for giving a little bit of a history, Oscar is a Puerto Rican political prisoner incarcerated now for 34 years for fighting for the self-determination and independence of Puerto Rico. I think it's also important to add the organizations that were working around Puerto Rican independence at that time that were he was a part of and his co-defendants were a part of, were fighting for the establishment of socialism in Puerto Rico. If we had socialism in Puerto Rico, we would not have the economic issues and crisis that we have had for 116 years. Cuba and Puerto Rico have shared a history of solidarity for centuries. And in that centuries, that solidarity has taken various forms. One of the most significant and recent forms of solidarity has been the work that the Cuban Five have been doing for Oscar. See, since the Cuban Five were released, they have been very active and vocal of taking the issue of Puerto Rico and the freedom of Oscar Lopez Rivera to all of the international venues they've been going to. We find it incredible that 5 men that spent 16 years in jail are now fighting for the release of another political prisoners. That is because they are Cubanos. On to the statement. Letter from Oscar Lopez Rivera. Oscar Lopez Rivera on the Cuban Revolution. This was written on May 8th of this year. For those of us who love justice and freedom, who want a better and more just world free of colonialism and imperialism, revolutionary Cuba has been and will continue to be a beacon of hope and an example to emulate. It is admirable that Cuba has achieved so many accomplishments in spite of the many attacks the U.S. government has carried out against its government and what it represents, including an invasion, terrorism, and the killing of over 3,000 Cuban citizens, and a criminal economic embargo. Revolutionary Cuba has been able to set an example of the importance of the development of the human resource, of solidarity, and of the need to defend just and noble causes. It started with a nation in shambles, with an economy in chaos and responding primarily to the economic interests of the USA, a poor educational system and a deficit in many important professions. But today, Cuba can send doctors and other medical professionals, engineers, teachers, and military personnel to help other countries all over the world. And its literacy program is being used in many parts of the world in order to eradicate illiteracy. It is the most literate country in all of the Caribbean and Latin America. Its praxis in solidarity is unique in the world. One act of solidarity that really reflects the generosity and commitment of Cuba and its government is what it did in Angola in order to stop the invasion of the racist army of South Africa. As many as 50,000 Cuban soldiers participated in that military operation, and thanks to the Cubans, the South African army was defeated and the back of the apartheid regime broken. This was the reason why Nelson Mandela let the world know that the Cuban people and its government were the best friends he and his people had. And for us Puerto Ricans, Cuba has always been the other wing of the same bird and the greatest supporter helping us defeat and eradicate colonialism. Cuba is a place where so many of us feel like if it were home. On a personal level, I feel deeply indebted to the Cuban government and to the Cuban people. As a Puerto Rican political prisoner, I have been the beneficiary of its generous and enormous support. I have had the honor and privilege to have spent over 4 years in prison with Fernando Gonzalez, one of the Cuban Five. Those 4 years have been the best and most meaningful time I've spent in prison. Fernando was not only a compañero, but also a brother. He incarnated the very best of what the Cuban Revolution has achieved. He earned the respect and admiration of many prisoners. They often approach me to ask how he is doing and want me to send him their love and respect. Since Radio Habana, Cuba just celebrated its 54th anniversary, I must mention how important the station has been to me. For many years before coming to prison and while in prison, I have been a listener to many of its programs. I want to congratulate the workers of Radio Habana, Cuba for the great work it has done and continues doing. I want to thank El Comandante Fidel Castro, President Raul Castro, and the Cuban government and its people for all it has done and for all it has given us. Let's keep on demanding that the embargo be lifted and that Guantánamo be returned to Cuba. Oscar López Rivera.
It's a solidarity message from the Haitian and Dominican activists. I would like to invite them both up here at the podium. It's Rayleigh Forrest from the Haiti Support Network and Arelis Figueroa from the Latino Ministry of the Riverside Church.
For us to be here together is to demonstrate the solidarity and our work together. And we know what is happening in Dominican Republic right now and the situation with Haiti. And we want to let you know that we are working together. We have been working in solidarity with our brothers and sisters here. And my name is Arelis Figueroa from the Riverside Church, and we just get back from Dominican Republic in a delegation, and that we were supposed to go to the border. We were unable to go to the border, but we went to the Batallas. We were 10 days over there acompañando the people, acompañando a la gente. Hicimos una misión de salud, a health mission, and advocacy, and just listen and being with them. And our message today, tenemos que endurecernos sin perder la ternura. The children are the more vulnerable. They are the more affected with this situation. And our message today, maybe we should go to the ground, listen what is happening, work, and spread the word. We know that mainly this is a political game, that the Dominican government always use the Haitian card. And they are doing that right now and playing all, they want us to get together with they want to fusion the country. Meanwhile, people are talking about that, and people are not paying attention to the corruption. Meanwhile, they changed the constitution again, and Danilo will be re-elected, and then everything will go back in place, because we know we can't live without the Haitian, right? We cannot support the economy without them. So that's our message today. Solo le pido a Dios que la guerra no me sea indiferente. Es un monstruo grande y pisa fuerte toda la pobre inocencia de la gente. Es un monstruo grande y pisa fuerte toda la pobre inocencia de la gente.
My name is Rayleigh Forrest. As was says, I'm from Haiti. I want to acknowledge the reason we're here principally is to recognize the role that Cuba has played in the history of the Caribbean, Latin America, and the world. In 1804, Haiti stood as the only country in the world where not one individual could be enslaved, where the only people not welcome were the oppressors. Cuba today plays that role on the international scene. Cuba has made us proud, like no other country, to be socialist. I'm sad to say, although, that in the 20th, Tuesday will be the 100th anniversary of the occupation of Haiti by U.S. troops. An occupation that lasted until 1934, that probably had as big an impact on the future, on the destiny of Haiti as the previous colonial period of French occupation. And today, unfortunately, Haitian soil is against occupied by foreign troops. And I will make a personal request on behalf of the Haitian people. I haven't got any written document on that, but this is the feeling of the people asking Cuba, because of the prestige that it has and the respect that we have for it, to ask other countries within Latin America that feel that their presence as a substitute for U.S. occupation is not welcome. It is not the solution to a military occupation of a country whose social system is based on violence, exploitation, and obviously imperialist subjugation. What's happening in the Dominican Republic today is really outrageous. And we call on all leaders and members of the Dominican left, particularly, to speak out against this outrage. We cannot allow this to continue. The lives of 500,000 people are affected, about half of them Haitian, who are facing violence, racism, and as what somebody called a modern form of slavery, and Dominicans of Haitian ancestry, about 250,000 of them were facing loss of nationality going back to 1929. This is unheard of, and this we will not stand for. I will join all of you to wish all of our respective countries to join the struggle with Cuba, that Cuba is doing so well, and for Haiti to have a new revolution, and this time a socialist revolution. Viva Cuba! Revolucionaria! Gracias.
Thank you, Ray. Thank you, Arelis. Well, our last speaker for tonight, unfortunately, we did have a speaker, Larry Ham, chairman of the People's Organization for Progress, but unfortunately he's been detained. So we have Aminifu, who will be speaking about the Million People's March, which is actually tomorrow. It's against police brutality, racial injustice, and economic equality. Ladies and gentlemen, Aminifu.
Power to the people, everyone. All power and praise to our brothers and sisters from Cuba and of Cuba. And I can't say enough when it comes to praise of the Cuban Revolution. Well, I'm 75 years old now, but I was a young man when it first started. And it brings very great significance to me that this program is held here at the Malcolm X Center. I'm probably one of the few people in this room who met Malcolm X and knew him when he was alive. And I was also in Harlem. Some of y'all were around at that time when during that famous session of the United Nations, when they were giving the Cubans a rough time with them downtown hotels. So it was Malcolm X who took the initiative to bring the Cubans to Harlem, where they stayed at the Teresa Hotel. Y'all remember that? Another brother by the name of Alumbe Brat was also instrumental that some of y'all remember in that process. And one of our sisters, who's oftentimes here, Sister Rosemary Mills, you know, wrote a book about that famous meeting between Malcolm X and Fidel Castro. So I'm old enough to have lived through all of that. And I remember one of the first great speeches that Fidel made after he got into Havana was against racism. And he outlawed all, at least legally, all racial discrimination in Cuba, legally. So I have great praise for the Cuban Revolution. And perhaps more than anything else, I remember the great work that was shown on film that the Cubans did in Africa. And I tell many people today that if it had not been for the role of Cuba in Angola and in Southern Africa, people like Nelson Mandela probably would have died in jail. Am I right or wrong? And Che Guevara was fighting in the Congo, I remember that. And other parts of Africa. So I'm one of those long-time fighters that's been here a long time and lived through all of that and still standing. Why I can say that I'm so proud of the Cubans and how they have stood fast and they have set an example, for the world. And I hope by our grace that they will continue to stand up for principles. Now, somebody trying to call me there. Now, most of you know that tomorrow in Newark, New Jersey, my organization, the People's Organization for Progress, is having a Million People's March. How many of y'all have these posters, these flyers? We expect thousands of people to be there, and we'll be dealing with much of this same subject matter. So once again, I can't say over and over enough for those of you who can come. This is one more step in this long journey for freedom and justice. And on closing, we from the People's Organization for Progress in New Jersey have been hosts to the Cubans many times. The last time was a group of Cuban women came. And we made sure that they not only spoke at the People's Organization for Progress in Newark, but also at Essex County College, which is the main junior college in Newark, New Jersey, and Essex County. And I'm proud to say that as many faculty members came as students. The president of that college is a woman from Barbados, and she talked about the great work, that Barbados had done with Cuba, and how some of them had gone to school in Cuba. So once again, all praise is due to the Cuban Revolution. May you continue your great work and stand fast.
Well, this brings our program to an end. I want you to know that we started on time and ended on time, right? That's see?
That's right.
And I want to say, you know why we did that? Why I think we did that? Because we're Malcolm, and Malcolm had the thing, about time. He always said if somebody doesn't have a watch, don't rely on that person because they're not going to be there on time. So thank you for coming, and thank all the speakers for sticking to their timelines. Thank you. Have a good evening.